right, let's get your reaction now to the mask and exclusion policies for Illinois schools, in particular 140 some odd districts that Sangamon County judge said is restrained from enforcing mask mandates or exclusion policies without due process. And I think that that's an important aspect here. The judge did spell out that you can still exclude students from school. You can still require them to wear a mask in school, but you have to get a public health order in order to do that. And that requires going to the court if the parent is not complying with that. And then the government has to prove in court that the individual is a health threat in order for that to be forced upon somebody. But the judge saying that the governor's mandates, the executive orders for masking and exclusion from schools, and also the executive order about vaccines and testing for staff at certain school districts is null and void. And that's prompted a bunch of school districts all across the state to take different approaches here. And we heard from attorney Thomas DeVore. He said that he is filing today a contempt of court motion against Chicago Public Schools because Chicago Public Schools say that they're still going to have their mask mandate in place despite some of the plaintiffs being from Chicago Public Schools. So we'll see ultimately what happens in that particular issue. But let's hear from you. 217-629-7970. 217-629-7970. Your thoughts. Are you sending your kid to school today with a mask or without a mask? Are you a teacher who is going to school today with a mask or without a mask? Because you can still wear a mask. Masks are optional. And that's something a lot of districts are implementing. After the weekend, hearing from their legal staff, hearing from other school districts, and even anticipating what the governor was trying to do with an appeal over the weekend and looking for some kind of stay on the Sangamon County Circuit Court judge's ruling. But ultimately what the ruling means is that those plaintiffs, part of the case, cannot be forced to wear a mask or to quarantine without due process. And again, I think that's important, without due process. Because as it's been right now, there hasn't been any due process. There's been a few cases where due process has played out, but only when it's been something that has been pursued. But when it comes to this arbitrary enforcement of everybody's sick until proven guilty, it seems that the judge in Sangamon County said that that's not an applicable way to go about this. That's not a legal way to go about this. Individuals still have due process, and they should be afforded that due process right by law. And even saying that the bureaucratic maneuvering that the governor's been doing with executive orders and disaster proclamations for this long now, she said something to the effect of this type of evil is what the law was meant to constrain. Some pretty powerful words. But let's hear from you now, you parents out there. Did you send your kids off to school with a mask or without a mask? What are you hearing from your school districts? 217-629-7970. Happy Monday. Good morning. You're on WMAY.
You know what the shield testing program is in town, right?
The shield testing program, U of I program, not all districts are using it, but you spit into a tube, they send it off to a third-party lab, and then they go about determining whether or not somebody has COVID. But that's not something you can force on somebody without due process by law. And that's something the Sangamon County judge has highlighted here. 217-629-7970. Good morning.
Good morning, Greg. How are you?
Good. Yourself?
Good. Yeah, I was interested to see how this transpired, and I still think that, especially for a school situation, that they should at least keep masks in place till maybe spring. I mean, the cases are starting to go back down. I feel like they may go back up, and a school is a petri dish on a good day for any other illness or virus.
But the masks are optional in a lot of these districts. You can still wear a mask if you are concerned, but there are parents out there willing to take the risk now.
Right, and that's their choice, I guess. But when you talk about due process and that they have to have an order from the Department of Public Health
right.
to show, I feel like we've already established that in the last 2 years. I mean,
well, no, it hasn't. But that hasn't been established. That
right.
hasn't been established because what's been happening is just executive order saying this has to be done across the board, regardless of if somebody's sick or not. And that's not how it works. The way the state law is set up is you are required to give somebody due process rights if you're going to say they're sick and limit their freedom of movement. That's in state law, and you can't just have an executive order circumvent that. If you want to change that, the legislature has to put their votes on it to change that. And that's the argument DeVore made. That's the argument that Sangamon County Circuit Court Judge Raylene Grishow seems to have been favorable of.
Right. Well, and I just want to say one thing. I mean, obviously, I'm past the point of being upset, but coming from somebody that's in the healthcare field and you see how a virus spreads and you do understand it, it's very, very discouraging that we are having this argument still. And
well,
listen, when you truly have the safety and health of everybody involved, I mean, that's truly our goal.
I get that. At the same time, it's 2 years old. Where's the legislature been? Why haven't they? If this is an emergency, as the governor says, why doesn't he call the legislature back 2 years ago and say, I want you to pass this in law to where everybody has to wear a mask? He didn't do that. They haven't done that.
But maybe they didn't realize people were going to be so objective to it. You know, like with the Spanish flu. No, with the Spanish flu. And then when the vaccine came out, people were lining up to get it.
People lined up to get the vaccine here. People lined up to get the vaccine here. Mask compliance has been very high. But I think people are now seeing 99% survival rate. The most, those who are mostly hurt by this are elderly or have 4 comorbidities. Young people are not impacted by this disease.
That's false. I don't know where you're getting the information from. I'm telling you that's false.
I think about 400 plus people have died under the age of 18 from COVID nationwide, and we don't know the comorbidities they've had.
But those people that got it, that spread it to maybe your grandparent, your mom or your dad that were in their 40s and 50s that died. That's the whole point.
Well, and then what you do with that is you go and have the due process involved, and you have the courts hear the order of quarantine, and you go on from there. Hey, I appreciate the call. I got full phone lines. 217-629-7970 is the phone number. Good morning. You're on WMAY.
Good morning, Greg.
Hey.
What's the name of this judge that decided to do this?
Raylene Grishow. She is a Sangamon County Circuit Court judge.
Cool. Raylene, whenever it comes time for us to vote for a new judge, you can rest assured you just, committed career suicide. Because there are people that are not going to be on the side of this. I don't even have kids, Greg, and this is nonsense. We all know that schools are the place. I mean, think about like daycare centers. Those are little petri dishes. Kids coming in there with little snotty noses and coughs and all that stuff.
It's always been the case. Yeah, it's always been the case.
It's always been the case. High school, schools in general, it's no different. It is no different.
But why not? But why not follow state law that says if you want to exclude somebody, if you want to use a mask as a medical device, you have to get a quarantine order. Why not follow state law?
Here's a better idea. I got one for you. If you don't want to wear a mask, don't. But let's have schools with teachers that don't want to wear masks and other administrations teach at those schools.
Well, I'm glad you're advocating for school choice because we've seen that happen where a lot of parents decided to yank their kids out of public school because the public schools decided to go remote extensively, and the learning loss that's happened led to a huge number of people seeking private schools or charter schools as a choice. So interesting to hear you supporting school choice. 217-629-7970. Good morning.
Good morning. Exactly. And that's why people have made the choice to start going to private schools. And I'm so thankful, Greg, that we have the 3 branches of government and the judicial system to keep the checks and balances, because this is a time that we need the checks and balances because of these ongoing executive orders and mandates. And I agree with you that it has to be due process for these people, because they've been kept under quarantine. We're going on 3 years now.
And we're approaching the entrance of the 3-year mark of COVID-19. And I'll just reiterate, if this is as huge of an emergency as the governor's statement indicated, that the judge's ruling was, the grave consequences from the misguided decision, that's a quote from the governor, then get the legislature back. Call them back and say, I want you to vote up or down on a mask mandate, on requiring masks in schools. I don't think the
That's
legislature has the political capital to do so because, listen,
well,
it's an election year.
but
Do you think that
but
people are going to want to vote on forcing masks onto kids in an election year?
and they also need to realize one more thing. He is not an emperor, okay? And that's why we have the three branches of government. And I'm thankful for this ruling, and people need to keep pushing back on it. And God bless Thomas DeVore.
Appreciate the call. 217-629-7970. Hearing from you out there about the mask ruling. Sangamon County Circuit Court Judge Raylene Grishow ruling that the executive orders on masks and exclusions for kids from school is null and void. And also the vaccine or testing mandate. So a lot of staff, part of that lawsuit, aren't going to be required to take weekly tests if they're not vaccinated. 217-629-7970, 821. Good morning. You're on WMAY.
Morning, Greg.
Hey.
Hey, I don't have a problem with what she did. I mean, even though I have grandkids in the school, what it boils down to is if you have teachers that don't want to get vaccinated and don't want to get tested, you simply call the school and say, look, my child can't be in that class, and the school has to move your child for their safety, or ask the teacher to leave, because the safety always comes first. I mean, this is coming straight from the word of a retired federal judge, is if your child's safety is at risk, then they have to remove the teacher or put the child in a different class.
But don't you think there should be also due process involved, which is what
okay,
the judge is saying is the law?
About the process, but you've been talking about due process on one side. What about the other side?
No, that due process is for all sides. And you can't just go and make spurious allegations that somebody's a public health threat without the evidence to show that they're a public health threat. That's due process.
But what's going to end up happening is somebody else, which I know, is going to file a lawsuit against the schools and everybody else saying, look, I want a mask mandate. I want it to stay. And then what they're going to end up doing is just shutting the schools down and going to remote learning. That's what they're going to end up doing.
No, they're not, because there's hundreds of school districts right now that are like, we're done with this. It's mask optional. If you want to wear a mask, you can wear a mask. Good morning. You're on WMAY. Nope, would have been. Let's go to this one. Good morning. You're on WMAY.
Yes. I am 100% sending my child to school without a mask today. He was so excited that there's going to be no mask, and we're just happy that's happening.
Be interesting to see what tomorrow brings as well, especially with some kids who have their parents say that they want their kids to wear masks. Peer pressure is a real thing. We'll see what happens ultimately in those cases. But there's a lot of parents out there in the same position you're in right now, seeing the elation in their kids' eyes. And the fact that they're going to be able to see their friends' faces, the fact that they're going to be able to bring their smiles. There's definitely going to be a lot of, I think, jubilation. But listen, I think that there's also going to be some concern, and hopefully everybody does take a very measured approach to all of this. We had a caller earlier. She said that she's a teacher, and she's going to wear a mask because she's with young kids, not because of the science of it, but to hopefully give a little bit of comfort to those who may feel that they still have to wear masks.
Right. And the science, well, I want to know what the science is of it. My kid has been wearing a mask for over a year and a half in our district, and we've had spikes, we've had no spikes, we've had spikes. It's been going up and down. We've only done one thing, and we've worn masks. Let's try no masks. That's what science is, isn't it?
Well, we'll see what happens ultimately with all of this. And science aside, you can have all the science you want. The law dictates that you have to have due process if you want somebody to have to undergo quarantine provisions, and that includes a mask. 217-629-7970. Good morning.
Good morning.
You're on the air. Go ahead.
Oh, we will be sending our boys without masks.
What was their reaction this morning or this weekend when you shared the news with them?
They were so happy, so relieved. We have a kindergartner and a fourth grader.
I can imagine that it's been a difficult time for them these past 2 years, especially your kindergartner. I mean, they don't know anything different, right?
Right, correct. Yeah, it is. It has been hard, and this is a really complex situation for a lot of different people. But for us, we have the right to choose what is best for our children. So we're going to choose that they're not going to wear a mask.
Yeah, appreciate the call. We'll take more of your calls here. Parents, what are you doing? You sending your kids to school without a mask on, or are you sending them to school with a mask on? Good morning.
Just dropped my nephew off as you were. I hadn't heard anything about this, Bishop, and I just dropped my nephew off, and we're listening to you, and his head snapped so hard towards me, and he goes, "I don't have to wear a mask." And I said, "No, you don't, buddy." And he goes, and I said, "If anybody gives you any crap, you just let me know." And I also want to say, I am so thankful that there are not as many liberals in this country as I thought that want our freedoms and our rights taken away. And I am doing an early hero of the week to the judge and to the attorney. Is it Thomas Duvall?
Duvor. Devor.
Hero of the week for the judge and for Thomas Duvall. Hands down.
Gotcha. Appreciate the call. 217-629-7970. Full phone lines here. We'll get them all, I promise, all throughout the hour. Good morning. You're on WMAY.
Good morning. Am I on the air?
You're on the air. Good morning.
All right. So I am sending my kids to their Catholic school in Springfield today without masks on. Even though we got an email last night saying the diocese had decided they wanted to continue the kids to wear masks. But I have a kindergartner this is her second year in kindergarten because last year she learned nothing. And she's never seen a teacher smile at her. She's had a mask on her entire school career. So I told the girls when I dropped them off, I said, if anybody says anything to you, just tell them that your mom would not allow you to wear a mask today.
Well, keep me posted on what ultimately happens there. So I definitely want to hear from everybody tomorrow as well. We got a comment here on social media. It says, so if everyone's so worried about schools being a petri dish, then why didn't they push masks during flu season for the past 30 years? That's an interesting question. I got full phone lines. We got to take a break. We'll get to the rest of your calls all throughout the rest of the hour here on the WMAY Morning.